it's me, Caitlin. Caitlin's got Parkinson's. I was just looking at my space station. I've begun setting it up. Well, I was thinking, well, what I'll do is I will set up the PlayStation, my space station, PlayStation, and then I'll use the 25mm figures from miniature figurines, these lads, and I'll then bring in more modern science fiction figures that I've got. So, for example, these early goblins, who sort of wouldn't do it. I think that'd work. And then I moved to these earlier orcs, and again, possible. But my favourite idea was to have an introduction of my favourite figures, who are obviously my squats. And I'm beginning to wonder now, will that work? And then I've got figures from other periods, so I've got some robots. Again, these early robots would work. Later robots, possibly not. Similarly, humanoid figures, I don't think that works. If that's a human in the red suit, that's not, and that's clearly a human, isn't it? Let me get, I keep doing that. Captain Kirk out. That's not going to work. So I began to abandon that as an idea. I do have some odd little bits of things. Look, I have I use these chaps as light infantry. Ghostbusters. Ghostbusters. And then I've got some, these used to be my Space Marines. I say used to be because I don't know what's happened. Tell me. This is the last lot of Space Marines I got. Spot the difference. But they do work quite well, those big Space Marines, with these Star Wars figures. That one's exceptionally tall, but there are some less tall. Well, that's okay, that looks a good match. And then there are things like these orcs, and again, that's a good match. So I'm now thinking not so much of the types of figures, but the scale. Again, I've got this Skaven. Now, that's not a bad match. But perhaps that's where I'm going to have to go, down that road. So we end up looking obviously at scale. So these chaps, miniature figurines, 1970s, are 25mm. And then we get to 28mm. Which I suppose is what these were. And these went with the other Rangers in that game. Not even sure what they are, what sort of period they are, to be honest. And then they seem to get a bit bigger. That's a conversion. But they start to get a bit bigger. And then they get really big. and the adversaries equally start to get big. So you end up with units that can only really wargame against each other, rather than say, oh, well, okay, I'm doing 40k, because these fellas are from a Star Wars faction, but they fit really nicely with these 40k dudes. But they don't fit nicely with the other figures. So it's all about then choosing ratios. So I now find myself in a position of looking at my squats as the baseline, because they're my favourites. Okay, so that's my baseline are my squats. They could fight those orcs. That doesn't look terrible. I personally think that size of Space Marine looks better than that size of Space Marine. And then I've got the other types of characters. So I've got the Skaven. That fits okay. The Star Wars figures fit okay. What about the humans? So let's look at the Star Trek figures. Now, if we're saying that they are humans in power suits, that don't work. So those humans don't work. That ratio is a whole box full of figures, not based on scale, unless we're going to say that the squats are now going to go into the 32mm scale bracket, because I do like the way the squats look against the bigger Marines. But those chaps fit well against some of my other more quirky Rangers. For example, the Ghostbusters, or Squid Games, or Doctor Who. And we have a Santaran, and we also have, I don't want to say what these are called because I always say it wrong. Asravati. They're like the skeletons in the library, and I don't even know what make they are. They're figures I've picked up when I've gone to wargame shows. Just random figures kicking around. Usually ready painted, which is another hint for the people with Parkinson's. If you can't paint figures anymore because your hands shake, don't buy them that somebody else has painted. You'd be surprised how cheap they were. So ratios, scales, what goes with what. I cannot, in all honesty, shove everything on the board and be comfortable with that game, where they are fighting each other and alongside my troops like them. I'm not comfortable with that, say, on Pinhead being that big. So I'm going to have to do that. I'm going to have to sort my troops now into 32mm, 28mm, 25mm. And I'm going to go beyond that, because I'm going to have to say, okay, the Star Wars figures, the Ghostbusters, the Doctor Who, Squid Games are 25mm of a certain build. So even if there are other 25mm figures, they might not go with them. I think the squats are in a nice position, because I do think the squats could go again with the 25mm, 28mm more slenders, let's call them, and with the 32mm robusts. So they're probably going to, I'll get the best out of everything that way. And then there are some things that I'm just going to have to wing it and say, I don't know, but yeah, I think. Like the Star Wars figures, the orcs. And then sometimes you can say, well, okay, those goblins and orcs are very a different scale, but they're old. So I want to use them. I don't want everything to be modern, but I now might end up with a right modern game. I don't know where I'm going with this, you can tell, can't you? But I've never, to be honest, I've never thought about it before. Because I've never played this, tried to do this before. So, new problem, new solutions. Let's see what happens. Tell me what you do. Would you just play with certain types of figures? All the 1970s miniature figurines play, and the others don't come out the box. The 25mm come out the box, nobody else does. 28mm do, the 32mm, whatever, and nobody else plays. And then we start to get into the, okay, I'm playing Legion, I'm playing Combat Patrol, I'm playing Stargrave. And that wasn't what I intended. I wanted to play 1971 Starguard with everybody fitting into the rule system, but everyone doesn't. Not because the rule system doesn't work, because the figures don't work, which all these years of experience, 60 odd years of wargaming, and I did not foresee that, and I should have done. I'm an idiot. And on that note, ta-ra, Chuck.